programming now. African Americans make up roughly 27% of Nashville's population, but the black community has borne the brunt of gentrification in recent years. It's also been hit hard by health disparities, struggling schools, and rising crime rates. What specifically will you do as mayor to ensure that Nashville's African American community isn't left behind? Jim Gingrich.
That is a great question, David, and it is absolutely true that our African American communities have been promised lots of things over the years, and yet we consistently show, whether or not that is little things or big things, that we are not prioritizing every community. Little things like what neighborhoods is power restored first and where is it restored last? What streets do we salt before a storm? These are things that need to change. You know, Clarksville Highway is going to be a priority for me. And then on big things, Freddie touched on a large investment in a stadium, the largest ever public subsidy in the history of sport. We're now talking about a new raceway, again, with a billionaire involved that will be 100% paid for with public money. And yet we can't sort out what we're going to do with Nashville General Hospital. These are things that the mayor has to make a priority, not just in terms of where we invest, because we were talking about a whole bunch of infrastructure issues earlier. The infrastructure has to go to the neighborhoods that need it most. Just look at what sidewalks are repaired and which are not.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. I started this campaign on the very platform that I've talked about, closing the gap on economic parity of neighborhoods that are sitting in the same tax district but not getting the services. That's where it starts. It starts with assessing all of these neighborhoods and not being equal in providing the services, but being fair, because there's some neighborhood that doesn't need the resources. Senator Campbell said it once in her own words, that her neighborhood doesn't need sidewalks. It's not like as if there's sidewalks needed, or some of that type of nature she stated. That's because her neighborhood already has what it needs. So now you have the opportunity. You know, an African-American woman in charge is not going to forget her own community, but nor am I going to forget your community. And it's about doing the right thing. It's about being intentional, unapologetic. It's about doing the right thing. It makes me sad when I hear that we are always left behind. But that stops today. I ask you for your vote.
Thank you. Jeff Yarbrough.
One of the clearest leadership tasks ahead of the next mayor is making sure that the city continues to move forward without leaving people behind. That's what we have to do. I think one of the ways that this city has long distinguished itself from peer cities in the country, and especially in the region, is our aspirations to break down racial barriers. I mean, you can look from the founding of Fisk in 1866 to the way that ABC alumni like John Lewis and C.T. Vivian worked in the 1960s to lead Nashville to be one of the first southern cities to break down, retail segregation. But we oftentimes fall far short of those aspirations. I think that we don't live up to our promise, and it's going to take significant leadership to ensure that we do. So, one, I think that starts with a mayor who's committed. Two, I think it requires building a team who has not just the expertise, but also the experience and diversity of experiences to ensure that voices are at the table. It takes a commitment to making sure that we are not planning projects for neighborhoods, but planning projects with communities. And that certainly applies to the African American community, but it applies much more broadly across this city, because I think we oftentimes see that City Hall has plans for our neighborhood, plans for our part of town, plans for our part of the city, without actually asking us first, without working with us on what the future is.
Ellis Rowley.
Yeah, so as a former public high school teacher and as a parent, I think our greatest failing is our failure to teach our kids to read. We see in the data that today only 25% of our children across Metro Nashville public schools are reading proficiently, and that is down from 10 years ago when it was 40%. Our enrollment is declining, our scores are declining, but our budgets are exploding. And there's no accountability first to say that all children in this city are our children. All children in this city deserve to be taught to read, and in particular, Black and brown children whose rates of reading are closer to 18 and 19%. It should make every parent and every taxpayer in this city angry that we are dooming our children to a future of failure. When I meet with the House Education Subcommittee Chairman on Education, and he says to me, Alice, what scares me the most is that when we are testing incarcerated individuals coming into our state prison system, men are reading at a first grade level and women are reading at a third grade level. We are knowingly, for generations, dooming our children to failure, and we know how to fix it. We have schools in the city that parents want to send their children to. We need to create the space and the time, and we need to support the science of literacy instruction across all of our schools.
Thank you. Freddie O'Connell.
David, thanks. And I just want to appreciate the League of Women Voters, News Channel 5, and the Tennessean for asking that question here on the historic campus of American Baptist College. It's great to be able to have this forum in a space that has been a legendary educator of people, including civil rights leaders, and I want my administration to be example of justice, equity, advocacy, and leadership, as we heard from Dr. Harris earlier. When 16 years ago I moved to the 37208 zip code, I had a lot to learn, and I started first as a neighborhood leader, working on projects, building partnerships in our community, but I knew I had moved into a diverse working-class neighborhood. What I didn't know at the time was that I had moved into a zip code that if you had been born there from 1980 to 1986 in a historically black part of the city, you were more likely to wind up incarcerated than anywhere in the United States of America. So we started tackling that. We addressed punitive fines and fees, giving people more money in their pockets. Over the past 5 years, we put millions of dollars back into the pockets of people, part of whose interactions with the criminal legal system was because they were too poor to post bond. This is the process of starting to repair those harms of mass incarceration. Going forward, if we look at the demographic characteristics of our metro schools, it's almost the inverse of the population percentages you stated earlier, David. And so that means every dollar we invest in metro schools, from our capital budget to our teachers to our support staff, is an investment in the future of black children, and I intend to do that.
Thank you very much. Heidi Campbell.
It's 2023, and we are still one of the most redlined cities in the country. And, you know, we have a movement to hide or erase the systemic racism that we are still experiencing, and that's indefensible. You know, I was actually talking to David earlier about a movie that the Nashville Public Education Foundation did called By Design that talks about the history of desegregation in Nashville and how particularly difficult it was in Nashville because of how redlined we are. We have such haves and have-nots in this city, where in my area of town, you have a school like Glendale that does so well because you have parents who put hundreds of thousands of dollars into that school. And then you have other areas with schools that are really struggling because, you know, you have parents, single moms that are working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. We have to triage those inequities or we will all not do well. We will all do better when we all do better. And, you know, I push back a little bit at the idea that we have been leaders in this. I think from great adversity comes great leadership, and that's why we have the John Lewis and Diane Nash, because this has been such an historically racist city. It is our job to triage that inequity, and it starts with making sure that everybody is getting a fair chance.
Thank you. Matt Wilshire?
By Design is a great film, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'd highly recommend you take a look. The Nashville Public Education Foundation produced it, and it really is instructive to our history and how we got here. And Nashville has been unfair for far too long, for far too many people. It has been unfair. There's a lot of work that we need to do as a city. My parents did that work. My mother was a professor at Fisk and then at Vanderbilt. My father was the executive director of the Legal Aid Society, which is like the public defender, but for civil cases, for 30 years. And they instilled in my sister Carrie and me the importance of making sure that everyone in this city deserves an equal shot. It is both fair and good for us as a city. Why should we want only some of the people to have an equal chance? We should want everyone to have an equal shot. It's better, it's more fair, it's the right thing to do. And so I have done this in roles in certain ways in the mayor's office when we created a small business incentive program that provided incentives for small businesses to invest in neighborhoods that have been neglected for far too long. When I moved to MDHA, we worked on redeveloping areas of public housing into thriving mixed-income, mixed-use neighborhoods, but we did it without displacing any families so that the social fabric of those networks could remain while their communities improved. And those are the principles that I will lead as mayor to make sure that everyone has a chance to succeed.
Sharon Hurt.
You know, I'm so excited because it seems like it's a consensus that everyone up here believes that there is time for a change, and I am the change that this city needs. I am so happy. I'm asking you for your support and your vote because I have transformed the community, 2 nonprofits, and hundreds of people along the way in the African American community, along with other work that I've done outside and throughout this entire community at large. I will support Nashville General Hospital. I will make sure that we continue with a workforce development program that I started some years ago, like in 2013, before I became a council member. I will continue to do that work. Imagine what it is that I could do if I become, or when I become mayor. I will make sure that we provide shuttle services for our seniors as I did in 2012. I have already added 25% to the stadium deal for small minority and women-owned businesses because I want to create wealth, build hope, restore prosperity to that community. As mayor, I will make sure that all boats rise. Doing all boats rise with this rising tide that we have in this community. I am so excited that you all agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, our final question. We have to reduce your time.